for joining our panel today. I am Deb Tatton, Senior Vice President and Head of Global Clinical Operations at Parexel. As a global clinical research organization, otherwise known as CRO, Parexel has had a front seat to the many impacts COVID-19 has had on our industry, our global colleagues, partners, and patients. I've been really impressed with the resilience and commitment of our industry and our colleagues at Parexel to continue delivering for patients. In fact, many of the changes we have seen in the past few months will be lasting in our industry for years to come. Parexel is focused on improving the world's health. We do this by providing a suite of biopharmaceutical services that help clients across the globe transform scientific discoveries into new treatments, all the while keeping the patients at the heart of everything that we do. From early phase clinical trials through phase 2-3 regulatory consulting and market access support, our therapeutic, technical, and functional ability is underpinned by a deep conviction in what we do. We are focused on delivering with heart. Our efforts have been recognized by our industry and sponsors. The 2020 ISR CRO Quality Report ranked Parexel the #1 CRO for service provider leadership in phase 2-3 clinical research, scoring us highly on leadership and customer loyalty. CenterWatch's survey of 4,000 plus global sites ranked Parexel a top 3 CRO on attributes most valued by sites, including well-trained monitors, otherwise known as CRAs, organization and preparedness, easily accessible staff, and maintaining open communication. And sponsor companies recognized Parexel for the 9th consecutive year in the 2020 Life Science Leader CRO Leadership Awards. Parexel was one of only 2 out of 29 CROs in 2020 recognized in all 6 award categories. They are capabilities, compatibility, expertise, phase 4, quality, and reliability. Today, I'm proud to report Parexel has not only adapted to the global challenge presented by COVID-19, but we are leading in the response. Today, our colleagues worldwide are contributing to nearly 100 COVID-19 related projects, ranging from trials of antiviral drugs to vaccines and diagnostic devices. In recognition of these efforts, we were recently named a top 3 CRO for market-leading COVID-19 services by Life Science Strategy Group. We have adapted our ongoing trials to the new normal, transitioning many of them underway to the decentralized clinical trial format, and winning a significant number of new awards using this approach. We are bringing trials to patients in their homes with an at-home screening visits, direct-to-patient drug shipments, and remote monitoring. When the pandemic first began, as a leader of our 5,000-person clinical operations organization, I had to pivot my organization to remote working and monitoring. This was certainly not easy. Today, we will talk as a group about that change and the many that followed within Parexel and the other leading organizations. I am grateful to be part of the industry and company that is playing such a critical role in this response, and for our global teams who have worked tirelessly to support our customers, sites, and patients as we move into the next phase and the future of drug development together. And now, let's get to our panel.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Limbach, producer of the PharmaVOICE webcast network, and I'll be your facilitator for our panel for about the next hour. The panel is called Managing a Remote Workforce, Case Studies in Maintaining Business Continuity, sponsored by Parexel. We are very excited to have such an esteemed group of panelists to discuss the importance of this topic. So let's meet our panelists. Deb Tatton is a 2020 PharmaVOICE 100 and serves as Senior VP, Head of Global Clinical Operations at Parexel, where she oversees a 5,000 plus team across study startup, monitoring, site management, and clinical operation leaders across the company's clinical studies. She's joined by Erin Horvath, who is also a 2020 PharmaVOICE 100 and the President of Distribution Services at AmerisourceBergen, where she is focused on ensuring the company's customers and their patients get the therapies they need when they need them. Nandini Ramani is a 2020 PharmaVOICE 100 and the Chief Operating Officer at Outcome Health, where she leads the revenue, product, and operations functions to ensure the most rigorous health information platform, which includes more than 152,000 digital devices in over 40,000 physician offices and health systems across the country. And finally, Jeffrey W. Sherman, MD, is also a 2020 PharmaVOICE 100 and Executive VP, Development and Regulatory Affairs, and Chief Medical Officer at Horizon, where he is not only changing the lives of people with rare disorders by working on innovative treatments, but his involvement with dozens of industry associations is elevating the patient voice in drug development, approval, and use. That is an impressive group. For more information about our thought leaders, you can go to pharmavoice100.com, but don't leave now, stick around for the panel. The session will be moderated by Taryn Grome, editor of PharmaVOICE. Taryn, take it away.
I am really excited about this panel, and the content couldn't be any more relevant, as most of us are still living in a virtual world. COVID is changing and has changed everything, including managing remote workforces. These external relationships are critical to maintaining business continuity. And over the next 40 minutes or so, our experts today are representing a diverse set of industry sectors, are going to provide real-life case studies as to how they made the pivot to mitigate business interruption. And what changes will the workforce sustain long-term, including any additional changes we might see, and their vision for the future. And then we're gonna leave some time at the end for some Q&A. So we're gonna get started. I'm so interested to hear how you all managed to make some pretty significant pivots to minimize business disruptions as the pandemic became a reality for all of us. Deb, I'm gonna kick off with you in your 5,000 plus workforce.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Taryn. Great to be here. And as Dan mentioned in the opening session or in my video, 5,000 people, 52 countries, it was pretty manic, right? So what we weren't is, I think, well prepared, like many other companies or industries, on how you would go through and address systematically each country's needs. And what we found is, well, one country would say you can come into the office, but you had to have social distancing. Others countries would say nobody comes in the office. There was all these different rules. So we had to come by country to figure out what we're going to do. In addition, we had to ask each of the employees, were their children being homeschooled? Did they have any limitations at home? Did they have the appropriate internet access, computers, office space? So we literally created a database for 5,000 people, and we were sorting it and graphing it out by country, and it was changing every day because a country or a regulatory requirement would be updated. We then had to track each hospital site on whether they would allow us to do visits, even if we ourselves were capable or didn't have local requirements, but maybe a site or hospital would say, nope, we're going to restrict visitors coming in. So we had a multi-tiered database to track it. I'll give you one kind of example of just how you can plan as good as you want and you still won't figure it out, which is by the time we had worked through it with China, which was really the first country that we had to address it, you'd think we would say, okay, we figured it out. Well, Japan was on the latter end of things, kind of when the US was coming into play. And we said, we're going to close the office. We made sure people had all the appropriate accommodations at home. And then we started getting frantic messages from our staff saying, well, they didn't have large volume photocopiers. And in some cases, they didn't have any photocopiers, and they needed to be able to send in packets to either the regulatory authorities or to the sponsors back that people were very used to, reams of paper to review them. And they weren't willing to take it electronically. So what we had to do, due to the confidentiality of our work, we had to give guidance, and we had to help find local convenience stores in Japan that people could walk to because they couldn't, we didn't want them taking train or other means of transportation or come back in the office, give them paperwork to make sure they could check the printers and make sure they didn't have a memory associated with it. So then when they copied the protocols or other documents, it would be permanently erased. And we had to do, so I never thought to myself I'd be trying to find 7-Elevens in Tokyo that people could photocopy and get documents in, but they were on critical path submissions that needed to be done that were part of really our clients' expectations that we'd find a way around it. So I figured you'd appreciate that as one of the learnings that you just, again, you picture yourself Googling, 7-Elevens in Tokyo, and you say, I never thought I'd be sitting here trying to figure this one out. But a lot of interesting information, but happy to hear some of the others on the panel experience, because I'm sure it was similar, but maybe very different from their point of view or their line of work.
All right, this is a challenge to beat the Japan 7-Eleven like issue. Wow, that's crazy. Erin, let's turn to you. What have you found during this whole craziness?
Yeah, well, thank you, Taryn. We do not have the complexity at AmerisourceBergen of trying to find a 7-Eleven in Japan. I can thankfully say I'm very appreciative of that. So, as you might know, AmerisourceBergen, we are one of the largest pharmaceutical distributors in the United States, and we take our responsibility to protect the global pharmaceutical supply chain while serving customers and patients during this pandemic very seriously. And so our role in these, kind of foundational elements of healthcare delivery, it's vital every day, right? We recognize the importance of and the role that we play every day. But as you can imagine, during a pandemic, we recognize that the importance of what we do is amplified as, care providers battle the pandemic, right? So we kind of had two different dynamics. We had our associates, I'll use customer service as an example, and many others that were used to working in an office environment. And so what we did was ensure that those associates had, laptops that they could bring home and that were enabled for remote use. And that our ability to execute upon that very quickly was driven by the creation of a cross-functional team that rallied together very quickly from all different parts of the organization to serve as our COVID-19 task force. And that team is still intact and still serving as the advisors and steering the ship for the organization. So another area of focus for the organization were our warehouse associates that work in the distribution centers and ensuring their safety. So as you could imagine, they weren't, they weren't working remotely. We had, of course, the importance of their role is to be at the front line and ensuring that the pharmaceutical supply chain remains uninterrupted. And so for us, we were very focused on ensuring those associates were safe, right? In terms of deep cleaning, with a variety of protocols, as you can imagine, as you guys know from going to your local physicians, the temperature monitoring of our associates. IT was able to create a very quick mobile app that leveraged the guidance from the CDC, and to ensure that as associates walked into the distribution center, they felt safe. It was a clean environment, associates wearing masks. And so those protocols, we have remained steadfast in those, even though, as you guys know, states provide different guidance. We've really remained steadfast so that our associates feel confident when they walk through that building, that they know that they are safe. And then the other thing that I would say is, we also took into account our business continuity plans. We all have them as companies, and we took a different lens in those continuity plans to ensure if for some reason we had some sort of disruption, that we had the support of our network to ensure that the pharmaceutical supply chain remained uninterrupted. Thank you, Taryn.
No, you're welcome. And that's so critical, right? Because if Deb is trying to make the drugs, but the drugs can't get to the people because you get shut down, then we are really nowhere. So well done. And that harkens back to the poll we just saw before we started about hazmat suits. So those folks are wearing them. And so I don't know what's going to take. We'll talk about that later, about what it takes to get everybody back to work. Nandini, I'm going to turn to you now. So I know you've had some interesting challenges as well.
Yeah, and definitely nothing like Deb with the 7-Elevens. We're only a US only operation. We're in all 50 states. So we did have to keep that in mind. And similar to Erin, our first priority, like everybody else's, was to ensure the safety of our employees, keep them safe so that they are able to continue to support patients and caregivers at the doctor's offices. So at Outcome Health, our business is a little complicated because we have a lot of hardware devices that you physically need to test, and they have direct access to account system. But for us in March, when we decided to go remote, within 2 days, we were completely remote and our entire employees transitioned to remote working. And the reason we were able to do this so quickly was because we're always prepared. And I know everybody has a BCDR plan in place, as do we. But I think at Outcome, we have a mindset of emergency preparedness. And the reason is one of our offices is in Tampa. And we're always, for those of you who know, we're always anticipating the next hurricane and system outages happen. And we've actually had to take down our servers and things like that. And so we have a mindset of seamless handoff, redundancy built in. And so I think that really helped us be nimble and go remote very rapidly, including making sure our employees have hardware, Wi-Fi, mobile computers, et cetera, and phone systems, right? We have a lot of customer support, et cetera. And so we had to do that. And I think to Deb's point, it also varies depending on the people you're supporting, right? Some of our employees have elderly parents they care for. Some of them have kids with homeschooling. So we kind of adapted the program to varying needs of our own internal employees. That was step one. And then on another front, like our leadership communications, I think is paramount in a time like this when suddenly you lose that, coffee breaks and networking that you otherwise have. So our CEO, for instance, has been emailing daily updates to keep people connected to the business. And this is now coming up on 6 months, every single day. But it's also about personal care, messaging, resources on how to create collaborations with other teams, et cetera. And the fact that we were able to do this rapidly really enabled us to make sure we could then focus on the doctor's offices, patients, and caregivers, because we are at the point of care and we provide content that's timely, particularly during COVID-19. So we developed new content with partnerships with CDC, Ad Council, Very Well, to name a few, to educate the public on prevention, support, and we've been tracking to the ever-going changes. And in addition, as I said, we have a lot of devices in doctors' offices. So what that entails is we have to service that equipment, and it varies by state through the waves that have come, how much access you have. So it wasn't just about taking care of our own employees. We also had to make sure that the technicians who go in, we provided PPE for them and to ensure that we abide by whatever regulations. We changed the messaging, pivoted to more phone systems and contact through phones for debugging, et cetera. So I would say now we've adapted to this as the new norm, and 6 months later, we still haven't gone back to the office. So that's our case study and story.
Wow. It's a lot of moving parts for all of you. And I know, Jeff, you commented this from a little bit of a different angle because you were in the middle of a launch. So talk to us about how you launched in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, no, thanks, Taran, and thanks again for the opportunity to join the panel. Now, where we're at Horizon, and a lot of our focus is in rare diseases and very debilitating rare diseases where patients are very much dependent on getting access to a product. And as it turned out, we were in the middle of launching a product, an intravenous biologic for thyroid eye disease, marked debilitating condition associated with Graves' disease of the thyroid. Individuals get marked bulging of the eyes, they get double vision, they need to get access to a medicine in terms of improving their quality of life so that they can literally see and do things. So you can imagine when something like a pandemic occurs and individuals are shut down or homebound, and if they don't have a significant other or a caregiver, that's a major problem. Now, fortunately for us, with the product Tepezza teprotumumab, we had been approved 6 weeks early by the FDA. So our approval was in January. Our PDUFA action date was going to be in March, which would have really put us right on the pandemic. So we were able to get up and going early, but once the pandemic hit, we had to think about not only patient access, protection, as you heard from everyone else on the panel, about protecting the employees as well. And given this was an intravenous medicine, access to infusions, whether that could get done at an infusion center, at home, or whatever. Fortunately, we have not only a home-based but field-based organization, had to mobilize our IT group because now we had a lot of employees working from home rather than the home office. Connectivity was really key, connectivity to physicians' offices, connectivity to providers who have to give prior authorization for medication. So a lot of retooling of how we work in a remote setting rather than in a face-to-face perspective. So a lot of those barriers we were able to overcome. And so this has been one of the most successful launches of a rare disease medicine, but we really had to relook at every facet of not only how we work today, but as we'll go through as well, what this means for the future as well, because it's a quote, new normal, so to speak.
Right. I don't know what that normal looks like, but it's new for sure. This is a great way to kick off this conversation with so many fantastic lessons in agility and leadership and resourcefulness, because, nobody's been through this before. So you really have to create your own guidebook to manage so many of these challenges. This leads us to our first poll. So Dan, if you wouldn't mind launching our poll for the audience.
Don't mind at all. So what we'd like to know is, how would you rate your organization's agility when the pandemic first hit? Was it great? Was it okay, but it needed some improvement, or was it just too slow? And the poll, share the results, and overwhelmingly great. That's good news.
Wow. I'm a little surprised, to be quite honest with you. So I think that's awesome. And I think that goes to show what strong leadership and resourcefulness, and as I said, agility can do. So, the mother is it necessity is the mother of invention? And it's so great to see how many people took that to heart and reimagined how they needed to work. So let's move on to our second section. So, as Deb alluded to, there are a lot of changes that are going to be affecting the workforce as we go forward that need to be adapted for the longer term, including additional changes. So I want to know, what additional changes might we see? And Jeff, we'll kick off with you. I mean, if this is the new normal, what does that look like?
One is really just how we access providers. A lot of physician offices were shut down. A lot of them now, as we're opening up, are restricting access. So a lot of this is taking, the concept of telemedicine and applying that to engagement. Just the fact of what, you had to do, Taryn, in putting together Pharma 100 this year. How do we really create a situation where we're as connected as possible? And a lot of this for our company comes from our CEO, Tim Walbert, who himself has been public about the fact that he suffers from 2 rare diseases. And so it's, what can we do? Because that patient could be any one of us here on the call, et cetera. And, how do we engage providers? How do we better engage all of our colleagues as well? Because the walking down the hall to run into somebody is not really happening now. And so it's really, how do we go out of our way to maintain that connectivity, whether it's a phone call, a chat, whatever, is really critical. I think there's more and more reliance on video conferencing. I know when the new school year started, Zoom had a bit of a challenge when everyone was getting on Zoom to connect with their child's school. There was a momentary shutdown. So I think that it's really looking in a more creative ways on how we connect remotely, how we connect and keep connected with our employees, and particularly employees who are, quote, coming on board and need to be onboarded in this situation. Very, very different scenarios now.
Right. There are a lot of people who are starting new jobs in the middle of this, and yet they are starting remotely, which is quite foreign to everybody, probably. I think the other interesting piece of this is about the telemedicine, and we'll tap into that a little bit later, but I think that's going to be an interesting piece of data for the industry as we go forward to see how many people are taking advantage of telemedicine in this times. So Erin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Taryn. You know, Nandini had mentioned a little bit about the importance of business continuity plans, especially as hurricane season is upon us. And, you know, that we do a significant amount of business continuity planning related to weather events, whether it's the wildfires or the hurricanes. And I think post-COVID, or we're not even over it yet, but, you know, through the lens of COVID, we've really have brought into light the associate and the human aspect of continuity planning, and recognizing and appreciating associates that are purpose-driven, right? At AmerisourceBergen, we're united in our responsibility to create healthier futures. And so, you know, our associates feel very connected to that and a responsibility as they turn on the TV and they see the pandemic. They believe that they're a part of that solution in helping communities get through this pandemic. And so getting back to business continuity, I think it's recognizing that our associates have these demands, whether they've got elderly parents at home or whether they're homeschooling children, and being supportive of them in that type of environment. And that just gets amplified during an extreme weather event, not only for our associates, but also our customers, as we try to ensure that they get the products they need to service their patients, and even their patients having a hard time being able to get to the pharmacy to get their medications during those disruptive events. And so we're taking a new view on those business continuity plans through the human lens.
And I think that's the difference, right, between post-COVID or during COVID and pre-COVID, is really taking in that human element far more, looking at far more intensely, I think. Nandini?
Yeah, so even before COVID hit, like last year at Outcome
That
Health.
time ago, yeah, all the way back then. I'm sorry.
I know it feels like a whole other planet now, but we had this choices strategy. We are the connective tissue, right, between pharma, patients, caregivers, and providers. And so right now we're within the four walls. And even as of last year, we took this choices strategy to basically transition into moments of care. And what I mean by that is, in a patient's health journey, we want to be there for whatever they need, wherever they need it, and whenever they need it. So I think it's a huge opportunity for us to make sure they get timely content anywhere they need it, which could either be through virtual, and Taryn, you alluded to that, either through a telehealth consult, or in person, or in their car, or wherever the case may be. And our industry, I think, is going to be nimble to meet patients and providers wherever they are. And the other aspect, I think, which we've already seen coming, is patients have become more and more involved in their health journey, and the model is more self-serve. So I think we're pivoting toward a more personalized care, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. I think Jeffrey alluded to it, right? Telehealth visits had gone up, but then if you take boomers, their access to technology, their ability to get on Zoom, and the hiccups we've had is very different than millennials who like consuming that. And the same is true when you look at condition specific, right? For chronic illness, it's very different than general health. So I don't think it's a one size fits all. We're going to see more customized solutions arise. And in order to facilitate that, I think the collaboration tools already exist today, like Zoom. You're a case in point, the schooling system is a case in point. And I think life sciences has had to adapt to these new times of having these collaboration tools. And today, I think we do have like smart on fire protocols for EMR, EHR systems. But when you're talking about patient information, we need secure mechanisms, and technology needs to evolve to ensure that there's no hacking going on, that data can be transferred securely. And I think machine learning and AI and others can help as well in making sure it's customized, and we can generate customized content and care for patients and caregivers. and I think I've heard this throughout, this has been the theme of PharmaVOICE so far, is COVID-19 has been an accelerant and a forcing function. And as we shift, and I think we will continue to see evolution in this regard. And personally, I'm optimistic that this is actually going to be a catalyst across life sciences, and particularly in point of care, in improving patient outcomes.
I think that's fantastic. And we hope that it's a catalyst to move the industry forward safely, but more quickly too, at the same time. Deb, I can't wait to hear your story.
No. Well, I'll be kind of quick because a lot of what I see as change has already been touched upon by Erin, Jeff, and Nandini, which is, you know, the healthcare industry and pharma is highly regulated, as it should be, right? So we see people already saying they're worried about vaccines. They want to make sure everything is safe. And that is all very valid. And therefore, you know, by doing things remotely or virtually doesn't mean we can take out the highly regulated aspect of it. And people often, I see in clinical operations, associate them together, meaning, oh, we want the CRA or the auditor to go directly to the site. They have to physically touch the document, physically see the thermostat. They want to see those. Well, there's, you know, I haven't personally used them, but there's other ways to physically see and often validate things. I mean, Parexel started recently, you know, they tested out in the regulatory space Google goggles, right? And imagine a world where you walk in and you virtually are in the hospital setting and you do certain things. And, you know, do you still eventually need to maybe get out there and rubber stamp it? But could you keep things moving forward by getting as virtually involved in it? I think there are different ways to stay highly regulated, do validation checks, and do things without have to always falling back to fly there, stand there, and sit there. Again, it is a delicate balance. I don't think you can go all or nothing. Same with telemedicine. I think there's a place and a time where you can talk to your doctor on Zoom and they can give you a pretty good idea if you need to come in or not. But there are also risks, as we've seen throughout the media, that, you know, people don't go in for their proper screenings and they run themselves at medical risk because they don't have that person-to-person and doctor interaction, and they shy away from those meetings either because they're nervous about the technology, right? I don't want my doctor to think I keep getting hung up on, or I can't turn the camera on, or they might not have the capabilities at their home. And I would say, as kind of my closing comment, in the research and development, if we're going to continue to try to diversify the patient population and we want to continue to go to other countries and hospitals, we need to be sensitive to the fact that they might not have the same capabilities as we may have in some of the more advanced countries that have been doing this for a while. And I think we saw that where some of the things that you just take for granted, those hospital facilities don't have the funding nor the capabilities to kind of do an electronic EMR or to connect with the Zoom. And you might need to make sure that they have business continuity plans, right? Do they have backup technology that they can use first and foremost to make sure that they can stay in touch with their patients, right? And that they have that opportunity to make sure that if they're participating in a clinical trial, which is what we want them to do to help with the well-being and the future of drug development, then we need to make sure we ensure their patient safety as a top priority. So to Nadia's comment, I would say, I think this is a catalyst for the future. I think that once we're in this right now, combination of telehealth and virtual work, we need to ride the wave and stay with it because it is a much brighter future, I think, for both patient and the drug development industry if we can stay the course.
Oh, well said. Absolutely. I'd hate for all of this to become an asterisk, right? We're making these plans, but we're also hedging our bets because we want to go back. But I think all day I've been hearing that the toothpaste is out of the tube and we can't go back. So we really need to figure out what that path is forward. And it's undefined at this point for so many companies and for so many functions. So you're really building the plane as you're flying it. I think that was the analogy that you were using. And I think it's really apt. So kudos to all of you for figuring it out this far down the road. And I know you have a lot more road to pave. So I wish you continued success in innovation, because this is what it's going to take. It's going to take some innovations to get us to that next checkpoint. And I didn't mean to, but speaking of our next checkpoint, Dan, we're ready for our next poll.
Let's do it. So we'd like to know, What would help make the transition to the next normal easier? Would you want better technology, more support from HQ, better communications, more flexibility, or all of the above? And close the poll. And guess what, Erin, you were right. Pretty obvious. But better technology really did pretty well considering it's part of all of the above. So that really lends credence to technology is very important.
And it also goes back to the first one where everybody, the majority of the people thought that their companies responded really well to the pandemic. So more support from HQ wasn't necessarily needed, nor were better communications because all of that had been handled. So I think that really, it speaks to the readiness of the organizations that we're dealing with here. But better technology, I think, is going to be interesting, and especially if we go into looking at more decentralized trials, remote trials, what that hybrid looks like is going to be interesting. So I think there's a lot of technology out there. It's about how we implement that technology in a smart way. Just my 2 cents there. So as we go towards the next section, and this is a little bit futuristic, and I don't want to put any of you all on the spot, but let's talk about the vision. So, if you look into your crystal ball, where do you see like your workforce going in the near term and then the midterm? And Erin, I'll let you kick off. So what's going to be happening there?
Yeah, thanks, Taryn. I think, I'll talk a little bit about kind of our workforce, right, and continuing the communication, the transparency. I didn't mention earlier kind of about some of those changes, and the transparency of information to our associates has really served us well. And I know we talked a little bit about being agile and nimble enough to be able to manage this pandemic in an effective way. But as we think about the vision for the future, I think it's a key component is collaboration. And I say that because I've witnessed through the last 5 months an incredible level of communication and collaboration between the public and private sector. Historically, there's been a little bit of a dynamic between the public and private sector in terms of whether it's natural disasters or organizing around an event. And I think I've just seen this tremendous amount of partnership between the communities and more specifically the manufacturers, distributors, as well as government agencies and our customers. We've worked more closely with Health and Human Services and FEMA and the CDC than far more than we ever have. And that collaboration really will need to continue in order to ensure that patients get the treatments that they need. And I tell you, I'm just extremely proud being a part of the private sector. I think that the public sector has been incredibly appreciative of the nimbleness and the agility of the private sector. And so I think, in order for us to put COVID-19 to bed, that collaboration must continue and that partnership. And I'm deeply proud, of AmerisourceBergen Associates, right, who continue to rise to the occasion, for our customers and our clients and our patients.
That's excellent. And I think that's another thing that we've heard throughout the day is that level of collaboration has just accelerated under COVID circumstances. And again, it goes back to the, needing to innovate, but not being able to innovate all on your own sometimes, and being able to move the needle as quickly and as safely as possible. So Nandini, I'm going to ask you, you're on the hot seat.
Yeah. So I think internally for our employees, I think we've gotten 6 months into this, we are going to see more flexibility in whether we work for some people it works to stay at home, but others will come in, and it also depends on the type of job. And we are going to continue to see that. And as far as the industry we support, which is point of care, I expect to see that we will strike a new balance between healthcare in person versus virtual visits. And I don't want to take away from the fact that there is something special about being in person with your doctor. There's empathy. You see other people going through the same situation you are in. So until we have virtual communities and others to fill those gaps, I think, and even if we do, there is something for the physicality. So we believe there'll be a good balance between the two. And as I said, COVID-19 being a catalyst, hopefully we will continue to see technology and virtual care also have a part. And we will see innovation in technology and practice management as well. And hopefully higher touch, right? Because now doctors can see patients more frequently, probably for less shorter periods of time in a virtual visit. And then it remains to be seen how, now you can cross state boundaries to see your patients. So there's a whole lot more to unpack, whether payers will continue to pay at the premium rates for in-person versus remote care, et cetera. But we at Point of Care, of course, we think it's important to keep in lockstep with the changes that are coming and be part of the patient-physician conversation wherever it happens. And the other thing I do think we're going to see is, which is, it's already there, right, with pulse oximeters and et cetera, is innovation in self-diagnosis tools, because health and wellness is such, on everybody's mind right now. But the main thing is going to see how these self-diagnosis tools will interface with provider portals. And as I cannot reinforce the security and privacy things that need to happen for that to be reality. And people will have more up-to-date information. And I think care will be on a continuum and in more real time than the ad hoc visits we go to right now.
Excellent. So, it's not only just the privacy, but then the education. So you have, the internet already created patients who think they can be Google Docs themselves. So now if we start to give them sensors and tools, who knows where that's going to lead to? I'm just saying. Jeffrey, I'll turn to you now.
Yeah, I think if anything, one of the key aspects for the future in a vision is more of expect the unexpected. We have to be prepared to expect the unexpected and whatever that really means. And I think COVID has really given all of us a new meaning of the term force majeure type of event. And, this is probably the biggest thing is a greater appreciation of some of the themes we talked about earlier: flexibility, agility, and how we work, both internally, externally, how we communicate to one another. I think that this is going to open up great advances in information technology on the communication front, how we can do things, more in real time, as if we all were in the same room with you, Taryn, right now, rather than remotely. Yeah, I think that is really, how do we keep that, high touch when we're working in a remote setting? And I think the other big thing is really taking the whole health and wellness to the next level. I mean, it really doesn't help anyone, and particularly those that we serve, patients, which could be one of us, or healthcare providers, if we ourselves aren't healthy. And certainly, if anything, is COVID, it's not, there's the emotional part of this, as well as the physical wear and tear that we really need to think about, not only for us, one another, because if we're not functioning at 100+%, that's going to have an impact on someone. And so it's really going to change. And the key here is that, as we get out of this, and hopefully that'll be sooner than later, we don't forget what had happened.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
We can't make this an asterisk. This has got to be something that continues on.
That's right.
And Deb, I'll let you take us home before we get to the Q&A.
Yeah, so I guess my closing comment, and if we go all the way back to the original part of this panel, was around the workforce, right? And
yes.
And so if I think about it, the exciting thing for me is, Parexel, like many companies, has had a flexible work schedule. We try to do work-life balance. We try to use that as a retention tactic and or a hiring approach, and we're a large organization. I will say that though in certain countries and with certain roles within our organization, it was just assumed you come into the office, right? That's your job. You come in, and in some cases it might have been because their supervisor needed to be there, or we didn't maybe leverage the technologies properly to put that oversight on productivity or metrics in the way in which you do. Well, now we've seen over the last 6 months that you can do it and you can be highly productive and you can allow people, you can trust them as professionals and you can allow them to work from home. And guess what you find out? They just saved some of the folks in some of my countries in Asia commute 2 hours in each way, right? So 4 hours, they're taking public transportation and they say, well, that's always what I've done. 4 hours. Now you've given them that opportunity to give some of it back, right? So they might work a little extra and some of it they now get to take care of, as Jeff said, their own personal health and wellness, their family's obligations. So you then hope that that's a retention tactic. They actually say, I like the flexibility that I have. I like the fact that I can be independent, but that the company has tools and mechanisms to monitor my productivity or my success so that when we do annual performances, it's reflective. They don't say, I don't know what you're doing, because they'll know. They'll have all the data they need. So I'm really hopeful that it helps open up the talent pool. It gives us greater flexibility to retain people and not always about monetary, right? So if you don't give me a raise, I leave. Oh, well, wait a minute. I don't have to commute in 4 hours a day. This is the best thing. You can't put a price tag on that. So I'm really, the vision for me is, given that I've got about 5,000 people globally, I'd rather retain them to have to keep hiring and replace people. So I'm really optimistic that this is a card that we all can play in the future to say, stick with us. You can work from home, look at the work-life balance, health and wellness. You can go down to the gym, do what you need to do. And that it's a win-win for the healthcare industry as we try to be more cost-effective with our solutions, but that we also can retain some of our talent within our industries so that, we don't spend a lot of our time constantly trying to hire and groom new employees. So,
And better for the planet too.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many benefits to that. The best part of this is that this whole conversation has been memorialized. So I will check back in a year and let's see how your crystal balls and your visions came true. This has been a great conversation. I do have a question that has come in. Is there anything that you wished you had done or thought of in the time of your planning that you didn't do as you look back? Is there something that you wish maybe it was a small miss or you wish you did something differently?
Erin looks like she's got something to say.
It's like, where do I start? No, I'm kidding.
Let's see. So I was just thinking the hamster was kind of going through the wheels in my head in terms of, thinking about it and ensuring that when we think about something like wearing a mask, right? And there is going back to this human element. And again, I know the context of this conversation is mainly the remote workforce. However, that something like wearing a mask, I would say it didn't take us too long to figure out the importance of that, but it took us a little longer than it should have. And we contemplated, right? And there was this dynamic in play between associates about who's wearing their mask and not wearing the mask, and are certain states mandating it, or counties mandating it. So I think hindsight, I would have been a little bit earlier to be decisive to say every distribution center across the United States, every associate is wearing a mask. It took us a little time. At the time, we didn't have a chief medical officer. We now have one and working in a consulting fashion. And so that was one area that I think we had a little hesitation over, like a 2-week period of time, that hindsight, we're wearing masks.
Yeah, and Erin, I'll just comment to say quickly, I would second that. And I would also say our appreciation for actually the PPE requirements and the burden it has, because I intentionally went out and did a site visit with one of the CRAs. I mean, the mask all day, it was 90 degrees, the going in the one-way door, going back out to get sanitized, communication through the phone, not in person. And, I walked out and looked at my CRA and I said, you are definitely my hero, that this is what you do every day. And I brought it back to our company to say, guys, we need to go out of our way to tell these guys they are incredible, because some of them have full gowns, masks, gloves. I mean, you name it. That's no bargain when you used to just walk in your street clothes to do your job.
I would say it's really given us all a greater appreciation of what it really takes to get things done now.
Agreed. And one of the other questions I had is, there needs to be a new level of leadership skills too. So now you have to lead remote teams and in office teams. And so that has to change how you approach your workforce as well. So what are some of those leadership skills that you've had to maybe tap into or rethink, or, you know, is it been more empathy? I mean, again, the unsung heroes, obviously that touched at you. And I got a little choked up when you said that, because these are people who are on the front lines and delivering for us in ways that we just don't know or appreciate.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeffrey.
No, I was going to say, it's really the empathy piece that you talked about. I mean, we're always assuming certain things, but, in this new normal now, we haven't had any dogs barking or anything else on these, but that's part of the new normal. I mean, there's family things going on. There may be children, we have to be cognizant of the support of the individual and their family, because that's part of the whole health wellness stressors that we're all going through.
Absolutely.
I think to answer both your first question and the second one combined, one of the things that I think I was surprised by is not everybody has the same stay at home, be remote, right? I said we did a great job of getting everyone remote overnight, and we said, okay, we're going to set you up. And that was only one part of the story, because after like months of doing this, if you're in a 1-bedroom or studio in New York, Manhattan, it's a very different story than if you're in the suburbs of Ohio or Cincinnati or wherever, right? And so I think that took a little bit of learning, because we had to come up with ways and means to see how you react, how you work with colleagues who are stuck and who are anxious to get out, because it takes its toll. Mental health is a big part of it. And I think that was a learning for us, to find the tools and support systems through our employee resource organizations, because it varies based on who you are. And also, to Jeffrey's point, do you have pets at home? Do you have children at home? And as a leader, I think empathy is a big part of it. You've got to learn how to work with different people, and higher touch for some of them who need it in different aspects. And I think that was something, and now we're 6 months into it. I think we've gotten significantly better with virtual pet hours and kid hours. And so we've tailored it to different employee, and we don't have 5,000 people, but I'm saying, even within a small population, it's a lot. Humans are a social being, and this is very hard, even though you can interact, via virtual means. And so that was one of our biggest learnings, both in terms of what we should have, and now we'll make it part of our BCDR, but also as a leader, how do you make sure there's space and room for that, I think is one of the learnings for us and me personally.
That's excellent. I think that piece of empathy wasn't really considered a serious leadership skill, as recently as 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's really inching up there, and that we're looking for our leaders to have empathy. We're looking for our leaders to be, to acknowledge some of the struggles that their teams are having. And before, it just wasn't that way. So we're seeing a shift in how leaders are addressing this COVID pandemic and needing to change. So it's kudos to all of you who have done so successfully. I think we're just about running out of time, but I do want to thank Parexel for your support and sponsorship of this last panel session. And I want to thank all of you, Jeff and Erin and Nandini and Deb. I will never forget the story about having to Google for copy machines in Japan. That is amazing. But the thing is, you did it, right? And so you found it, and you found the solution, and that taps into your resourcefulness. And so, but we have to, it's for another time, but why do we still need to have all that paper? And I know that was not the subject of this conversation, but yeah. Why? Right?
There's endless learnings that come, because I say the finding the copier isn't the proudest moment, but we got it done. But to your point, the lesson of we have so much technology, we don't leverage it to the extent that we need to, and then hopefully that some of the change and some of the flexibility that was asked in the poll question of, I think we need the industry and ultimately our companies to be a bit more flexible. You got to stay within the guidance. You got to actually do, apply the appropriate measures, but then you have to use some flexibility and common sense to say, maybe we could do without 4,000 pieces of paper. So
someday, fingers crossed again, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't do this 24-hour marathon without you, who are so critical to the thought leadership. And thank you so much for convening. And you are my very first all 2020 PharmaVOICE 100 honoree panel today. So congratulations to all of you. And I'm so glad that you were all kind of able to be part of this community. So thank you so much. And for all of the rest for our audience who wants to continue the conversation with you all, on Twitter, please go to #PharmaVOICE100, and your Twitter handles are available with your bios on our leadership tab on PharmaVOICE100.com. So thank you so much again.
For more PharmaVOICE 100 content, visit www.pharmavoice100.com.